Everyone, welcome to the YES Monitoring and Evaluation webinar. We are glad that you could all join us today for this virtual event to learn how monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, can enhance your community service projects. Before we begin, let's go over a quick review of some of the features in the Zoom room so that all attendees can participate seamlessly in today's webinar. Please make sure your chat box settings are set to all panelists and attendees so that everyone sees your comments and questions. In addition, please note that we have automatic live captioning. You can access the live captioning by clicking the CC Live Transcript button on your Zoom toolbar. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A and chat box functions. We will have a designated question and answer time at the end of the webinar. For those joining us on Facebook Live, please feel free to add your comments and questions there as well. We are recording this webinar and we'll put it on the YES YouTube page with subtitles a few days after the event. Before our speakers present, I want to ask an introduction poll question for you all to answer so we can have a sense of how familiar today's attendees are with M&E. So I'm going to launch that in a second. So the poll has been launched, so please share your answers. Okay, I'm going to leave the poll up for about 10 more seconds. I will share the results. So as you can see, it seems the majority of attendees here have not ever used M&E in a community project, which is fine. That's why we're here, to learn about it. But we do have some veterans here who have either used it once, 2 or 3 times, or 4 or more times. And it'll be interesting to hear about your experiences in the chat box and Q&A session as well. So thank you so much for sharing these results. And now I would like to start by giving a brief introduction to our first guest speaker. So our first presentation will be by expert guest speaker, Alan Kakinda. Alan currently serves as the Senior Manager of Innovation, Monitoring and Evaluation at Compassion International. He has over 10 years of experience in providing M&E design, technical assistance, and advice in a variety of sectors in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He is passionate about using data and statistical methods to generate evidence to inform and improve programming. He has also been a member of IRON since 2002, where he joined as a student, and he is currently a country coordinator for IRON in Uganda. So without further ado, Alan, why don't you get started?
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And I must say I'm honored to be invited to speak at this webinar. And I hope you'll find it beneficial and learn one from my knowledge and experience, but I'm also looking forward to learning from your knowledge and experience too. So if we can move to the next slide. So I've called my presentation M&E 101 because I'm mostly going to cover the basics. There is certainly a lot more that is beyond this presentation, so I don't want you, I want you to leave this I want you to leave this presentation with a general appreciation of M&E and general understanding of M&E, and hopefully you'll be able to read more and learn more about this subject. Next slide. So as I've been introduced, I'm Alan Kakinda. I work at Compassion International as a Senior Manager of Innovation, Monitoring and Evaluation. And yeah, I've been doing M&E for the last 10 years. I think since I left school, and in a variety of sectors and across different continents. So what I share, what I've been sharing with you is what I almost do on a daily basis. I'm also a consultant and co-founder at Eagle-Light Associates, and part of the work that we do there is M&E for programs and projects. If you can move to the next slide. So I wanted to start off my presentation with this quote, and it's an interesting one. One of Milton Friedman shared that one of the greatest mistakes people make is to judge policies, projects, and programs by their intentions rather than their results. So the thing is, we always have good intention when we start projects, but it's not enough to have good intentions. We really need to know whether the projects we are doing are working or not. Otherwise, it's only just intentions. You may be off track. Yet for you as a person, you think you're actually doing a great job and you're implementing a great project and making a difference, when in actual sense, you're actually not. So M&E helps us with tools, resources, and methodologies that help us to test whether our programs are working or not, and we're able to generate results. And as we'll see, the main purpose is not really to judge on whether a program is working or not. Main purpose of M&E is really learning. So as you continuously do it, you're learning through the process, and you keep improving and adjusting the program up to when you get the results that you intend to want within the program. So next slide. So my presentation is in 4 sections, and I hope you'll appreciate after the 4 sections. So I'll first of all talk about monitoring, then evaluation, talk about the different the definitions and the different types of monitoring and the different types of evaluation. And then we'll talk about why do we do M&E, and what are some of the guiding principles we always need to have in mind as we're doing M&E. And then 3, we'll talk about data collection, because it's a huge part of M&E. I'll also hint bits and pieces around the analysis, and then I'll share, I'm hoping to share useful resources that you can use in your work at the end of this presentation. So next slide. So we'll begin with defining monitoring. So project monitoring or program monitoring is the systematic and routine ongoing collection and analysis of information of what is happening within the program. And so this is typically done all through the program. And we'll look at the different types of data that can be collected or need to be collected as you're doing monitoring for the program. But the aim of monitoring is not, okay, so one of them is program accountability, especially if there are resources, financial resources, or whatever resources, even if it's human resources that you're getting from the community. I think it's important for people to know where their resources are going and how helpful they are, but also mostly for program improvement. So the thinking behind this is that I don't need to wait for the end of the program to know what is going on within the program, because at the end of the program, I would have made all these mistakes and I can't course correct. So you do monitoring within the program to ensure that you're cross-checking what is happening within the program and course correcting up to when you get to what you exactly want to extract out of the program. So next slide. So there are various types of data that you need to collect when you're doing monitoring. So one of the types of data, which is pretty obvious, is financial data. You need to understand how financial resources are being allocated within the program. Is it the right way? And again, as we've said, for monitoring, whatever results you're finding, you're course correcting. So you're learning through the process and course correcting. Then 2, activity tracking. So what activities are you implementing within the program? Are the activities you plan being implemented? And then how are they being implemented? For example, if you're organizing trainings, how many people are showing up? Who is coming? Are they the right people you want? And again, as you're learning all this information, you're course correcting such that your program is improving. And then targeting data. And targeting data is usually for two purposes. So you can organize trainings, but targeting data helps you know whether you're actually getting the right people within your programs that you desire to reach. And again, if you're not getting the right people, then you course correct, because that's what monitoring data is for. Next slide. And then two other critical types of data that are very important to correct as you're collecting monitoring data is take-up and engagement data. So again, good targeting data makes analysis of take-up data possible. Since take-up data is comparing the percentage who are actually using the program, the percentage of people who are actually using the program that you intend to reach. And then engagement, you need to know how are people engaged within the programs. Are they liking it? This is where you collect information like satisfaction information. Are people getting satisfied with the program? Are there tweaks and bits and pieces you need to change to ensure that the program is actually getting, reaching them rightly and also helping them. And then feedback data finally is information that gives you, you collect information on the strengths and weaknesses of the program, and of course, getting perspectives. Sometimes as program implementers, we are going to talk about bias in a bit, but we are very biased. We are, again, because of our good intentions and because of what we want to do, and the good hearts we have to change community, we are so biased that some cases we are causing harm. So feedback data is to help you know what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of your program, and how is it reaching the actual intended audiences, and how helpful is it to them. So, yeah, so that's monitoring. Next, we are going to be looking at evaluation. As I said, the M&E is made up of two words, monitoring and then evaluation. So evaluation is more long-term now. And people usually define it as systematic and objective assessment of ongoing or completed projects. Sometimes it's done internally, sometimes externally. And we're going to see this as we look at the various types of evaluation. But the purpose now is to determine the relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability of the project. And again, all this information is to inform programming decisions. And when can it be done? Evaluation can be done all through, again, at any point within the program cycle. Sometimes it's done at the beginning or even before for design purposes, or sometimes it's done way after the program has been implemented. And this really focuses on how well has it happened and what difference has it made, if you're to summarize that. And so on the next slide, we're going to let's look at the different types of evaluation. Now I categorized, now this is not, I want to emphasize that these are not the only types, but I want to highlight the major ones for learning purposes. And I'm categorizing them in terms of according to timing, when it takes place, according to who conducts it, and also according to the methodology that is used to conduct the evaluation. So, so let's start with the timing ones. So formative evaluations or baseline evaluations, they usually occur before or during the project implementation. And if it's formative, it's really for program or project design. So you're going out to the community which you want to serve, and you're asking them specific questions about some of the assumptions you have on the challenges they are facing, and then you use that information to craft the actual program that you have. I want to say that even when you're doing formative evaluations, you are not starting from scratch. It's very important to get some information about the community. So sometimes we'll look at some of the data collection methods, but it's usually good to start by reading up about the community, do a literature review, engage community stakeholders, find out how big is the problem you're trying to solve with your program, and understand it better. And then you design the evaluation at that point to help you understand that problem better. And then if it midterm evaluations, again, they are sometimes formative in purpose, but you do them midway the implementation of the program and your understanding. So when you do the baseline, you get the status quo. Midterm is to help you know midterm. So if I'm implementing, let's say, 5-year projects, so I'll do the baseline at the very beginning. I get the status quo, what is currently happening within that community. Then when I do the midterm, let's say 3 years later, I'm figuring out, is the program working? Is there any difference that the program is making or not? And like we said, again, the reason we do M&E is to learn and course correct, such that you're not finding out at the end of the program that actually this thing doesn't work. I could have learned this earlier and done better. And then summative evaluations, sometimes called baseline endline evaluations, they occur at the end of the project implementation and assess effectiveness of the program and sometimes the impact. And then final evaluations, very similar to summative. And then we have what we call ex post evaluations. These are conducted sometime after the implementation, and sometimes you want to assess the long-term impact and sustainability of the project that you implemented. So 2-3 years after you've implemented the project and shut it down, you're finding out, are people still using the water? If you provided the water source, if you did a wash program, are people still using the water? And sometimes you may have implemented certain things to, say, provide sustainability, like a water committee and all that. Are all those processes still in place, or they are no longer in place? And again, that gives you great feedback, such that when you try to implement the program again, you're not making the same errors or mistakes. And then internal or self-evaluations, this is really whether you're conducting it yourself. External is outside evaluators. Sometimes they're participatory. You have different stakeholders engaging. And the big benefit of participatory evaluations is they can be empowering, they build capacity and ownership and support. And then joint evaluations, sometimes you're working with different people within the same community, and so you decide to do the evaluation together. And then according to methodology, real-time evaluations, these take place within during the project implementation. They provide immediate feedback for modification and improving ongoing implementation. Then meta-evaluations, this is when you're combining a lot of evidence, and it's used to assess the evaluation, sometimes the evaluation process itself. Thematic evaluations, they focus on a specific theme. Let's say you're focusing on gender, you're focusing on environment across a number of projects or in different organizations. And then cluster or sector focuses on a set of related activities, projects, and it's typically conducted across various sites or multiple organizations. And then impact evaluations. Here we use rigorous methodology, and we want to know whether it's actually the project that caused the difference that you see in the results. And for impact evaluations, you usually want to have what people typically call a counterfactual or a control group, a comparison group, such that you're able to mirror the situation when the program was not there and when it was there, and comparing those results to know whether it's actually the program that has made the difference. And why is that important? Because sometimes when we're implementing programs, let's say you're implementing the WASH program in a village somewhere, you're not the only player in the field. So impact evaluations help you know whether it's actually your project that made the difference and within the program. So I want at this point, I think, to launch a Zoom poll to help you reflect on the information I've shared. So Alexander, if you can help me launch the first poll.
Okay, the poll is launched. And Alan, this is the right poll. Which of the following is a type of monitoring data one needs to collect for their project? Great, so we'll let folks answer these polls. Great, I see some answers coming in. And it actually looks like, Alan, the second poll is also populated. So we can put that one back up later. For some reason, they came up together. So I think for the meantime, we want to focus on the first question. Is that correct, Alan?
No, no, both questions are for the same poll.
Okay, both questions,
So
great.
okay.
So then the other question is, which of the following is aimed at determining the relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability of a project in order to inform programming decisions? So go ahead and keep answering those polls. There's been over about a third of people have voted, so we'll wait another maybe 20 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. Okay. And I will share the results. So Alan, can you see those?
Yes, I can see them. So awesome, thank you so much. I see that at least 50% of us have answered, so that's good. And a majority of us got the right answer on question number 1. So all the above are types of monitoring data. So you need to collect feedback data, take up an engagement, targeting, and also activity tracking data. And then for question number 2, which of the following is aimed at determining relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability? Yes, it is evaluation. So I see all of us are following well. And yeah, so thank you so much for that. So I'll move on to the next slide now, to the next part of the presentation. Good. Now, so first go back to that slide. So yes, so as we understand M&E more, I want us to start thinking about M&E not just as something we do for the donor or for compliance purposes, but it to become an integral part of the project or what we are doing. Why? Because it's very good feedback. Again, I said it would be catastrophic for you to implement a project and get to the end and things haven't worked out. I think that would be horrible. None of us wants to waste our efforts on doing something that doesn't work. So it is for learning. So next slide. So we are going to start looking at why do we do M&E? Why is it important? So next slide. So the first reason is really you want to support your project's implementation with accurate and evidence-based reporting. So again, it's not really, we understand that we all have good intentions, but like we said from the quote at the beginning, good intentions are not enough. We need to be collecting evidence that actually, 1, the program is happening, then 2, it is happening the way you want it, or you're continuously improving it to get to the place where you want it to be. And then number 2, we've talked about, I think I've hammered this down as much as possible for organizational learning and knowledge sharing. So you need to be learning through the process of implementation of the project and improving, continuously improving, such that at the end of it all, your beneficiaries or your program participants are enjoying and benefiting from the program. Number 3, we've already talked about stakeholder feedback. So it's an opportunity for you to receive feedback from the various stakeholders. Number 4, and I intentionally put accountability and compliance at the end because I want it to be the last thing on your mind. So sometimes our funders require us to do this, but I want you to start looking at it more of how do you benefit from it versus just reporting to the donor and complying with what their requirements are. And then finally, I think you will be able to promote and celebrate your work with concrete evidence. How many people have you reached? What difference has it made in their lives? And you can clearly see that your project is improving people's lives. So next slide. So again, I want to emphasize that sometimes we want to look at it from the point of view of M&E should be done by a technical expert and all that. Yes, it is good to have experts like me, and we certainly want to be employed and make use of our skills. But I think the expert alone is not enough. Everyone needs to be involved within the M&E processes. And that's why I think it's critical and important for all of us to understand what M&E is and how we can play a different role. And sometimes you actually can't have the experts. So you need to know it and be able to do it yourself. Next slide. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to be talking about some bad habits. When we get excited about M&E, some of the bad habits we get. So this is one of them. So sometimes we are just collecting information and collecting as much of it as possible. Like we see in this cartoon, we are saying, let me get all the information I can. I don't know when I'll use it. So what are some of the guiding principles that we need to use as we're doing M&E for our projects? Next slide. So I want to share 4 principles, and these principles are explained extensively in a book called The Goldilocks Challenge by Mary Kay Guti and Dean Carlin. So you can read more about these principles in the book. So one is credible. We need to ensure that we are collecting high quality data and analyze that data accurately. So one of the principles of one of the things you need to always ensure is avoiding bias. High quality data is not biased. So sometimes you're not the right person to collect information from people. One of the common biases we get as project implementers is what they call social desirability bias. So if you as the individual, for example, who is implementing the program, you go to the people you're providing the program to ask them the questions, especially, for example, feedback data. They'll in most cases tell you, this is working well, we love it, we enjoy it. But in actual sense, they may not be enjoying it, but they're telling you that. Why? Because you're the one bringing that program to them. So sometimes you're not the best person to collect the data. You need to find an anonymous way of collecting the data, either through web surveys, and it's self-administered, or sometimes we get what we call external data collectors. So neutral people, you train them on the tools that you've developed, and they help you collect that data. And that way you're able to avoid bias. And there are very many other biases that we try to control for when we're doing M&E. But that is important, and then analyze it accurately such that you're drawing the right conclusions. We know the common saying, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to analyze it accurately. Then actionable. Do not collect data that you do not intend to use. In any case, so you need to commit to collect data that you're going to use for your programming, and that is going to be helpful. Then responsibility. As you're thinking about the data and you're designing whatever tools you're designing, however long they are, think about the benefits versus the cost so the cost in this case is not necessarily the cost to you, the program implementer, but also the people you're collecting information from. So it's very important that you're not burdening them. So sometimes people design long tools, like people spend hours and hours filling in the information, yet the person is actually not even going to use it. So you need to value people's time. Focus on collecting actionable data, only the data that you need for your program, or the most important data. You don't need to collect everything. data. This is not cast in stone, but it's always good to collect data and generate knowledge that other programs can benefit from, such that as you share your data, people can know whether the programs work or not. So it's not good to also keep it within yourself. You need to share it out there. Next slide. Yes, so again, remember that M&E data is only useful if it is used. So actionability, that's why I included this. I wanted to emphasize that. Actionability. Otherwise, you can easily, like I said, if you're not using it, your program may not achieve the results that you intend to achieve. Next slide. So I wanted to talk, so a big bit, I know a lot of you are engaged in, some of you shared that you're doing some data collection. So I wanted to share data collection methods that you'll find useful and applicable in some of your programs. So when we are talking about data, we talk about two types of data. Primary data, which is data that you collect yourself, and secondary data, which is data that you other people have collected. Again, remember the principle of transportability, using people, generating evidence and sharing it such that other people can use it. So secondary data comes from there. So, and there, again, under primary and even other secondary, there are two types of data. There's quantitative data, which is the numbers, the figures, percentages, and qualitative data, which are the insights. And in many cases, they are complementary to each other. The numbers shows you the state. The qualitative shows you why. Why is that state? So let's say 50% of the people are not using the water, the well that you built as a part of your project. So once you know the 50% are not using it, then the qualitative is going to help you know why are people not actually using it. And the combination of these two helps you know what gives you actionable data that you can use to improve your programs. So quantitative data, we commonly do two types of interviews. Some are self-administered, so you do surveys or questionnaires, and they're self-administered either in person, you give the person the questionnaire, they fill it out themselves, you call them on phone, or in some places is what they call CAPI. CAPI is computer-assisted programming interface, personal interviews, yes, computer-assisted personal interviews. So you send them the link, the person fills it out on either phone or their laptops. And then sometimes you send it in the email. And then sometimes it's good to do self-administered. Sometimes, especially where literacy levels are very low, it's good to have someone else interview the people using the questionnaire. And then qualitative, in-depth interviews with people, and you're asking them specific questions. So we usually design an in-depth interview guide, which has the questions, the different things you want to touch, and then you ask the person directly. Focus group discussions, you get people into a group of 5 to, I think 2 to 8 people maximum, and then you discuss about the topic and question and understand better. Then key informant interviews are for if you have an expert in the field or you have community leaders that have an expert opinion, you do that. And then common methods for secondary data collection. So you'll do either document or literature review. So you get literature of what other people within the field. Again, it's important to acknowledge that you're not the only person who is making a difference. So what are the other people learning and how can you learn from that? And also what we call web scraping, where you use either Python or R or any other language to help you look for information on the web. So next slide, which is really the final. Okay, go back up. There's a poll. Sorry.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Go back, yes. So we're supposed to run the poll.
Okay, I'll launch the
Sorry.
poll. We'll see whether people remember that. So the poll has been launched. Please enter your answers. Okay, some answers are starting to come in, but let's leave it open for about 30 more seconds. Let's give it about 10 more seconds. So please enter your answers if you haven't already. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. Can you see the results, Alan?
Yes, I can. So yes, number one, option A is the right answer. So M&E mostly is to contribute to organizational learning and improvement. Then actionable principle, the middle answer is the right one. We need to commit to act on the data that we collect. And then which of the following is an example of primary quantitative data collection method? Yes, it is self-administered surveys stroke questionnaires. So thank you so much for following. I think I have one more slide where I'm sharing some resources that you will find helpful in the M&E journey. As I said, I'm just enticing you and interesting you in M&E. There's a lot more that you can learn. So 2 books there that I've found very helpful, that you can also find very helpful. Some survey software if you need software tools and resources. And a lot of this software does some analysis for you. So that would be very helpful for you. And then finally, the Goldilocks Toolkit, which has a lot of resources on M&E and what you need to do. So thank you so much. I want to end here my presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. I really enjoyed that presentation and really appreciate you giving such an informative and engaging introduction to M&E. So now we will hear from our first alumni guest speaker, Musa. Let me give a brief introduction first. So Musa is a YES alumnus from Liberia. He is the founder and executive director of Better Understanding for a Better Liberia. He is a youth leader and advocate with extensive experience in youth initiatives and volunteering, including peace building and interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Musa was an intern at Youth for Understanding USA, Digital Diplomacy for West Africa, where he helped moderate the digital diplomacy training. Musa, why don't you get started?
Hi, thank you for that presentation, Andrew. Like you said, I'm Musa and I'm from Liberia. Currently, I live in the US in Apina and I'm studying electrical system technology. So it's a pleasure today to be one of the panelists here. So yeah, I just want to give a little introduction about my organization. So Better Understanding for Better Liberia is a nonprofit organization. And the reason why the organization was funded was because if anyone has been following some West African, history, in Liberia, we had a long civil war. So, peace building and, maintaining peace has been like a very, paramount thought for most of the people, young people growing up there. because we were born like in refugee camps and exile and other places. So when I came to the US, I was able to attend the Better Understanding for a Better World conference in Baltimore, Maryland. And I learned a lot from other YES alumni and from other part of the world. They were doing like amazing things with peace building and other initiatives. So I had a mindset that when I go back to Liberia, I was going to fund some youth initiative to help maintain the peace in Liberia and also be involved with youth development and activities. So that's a little background about BUBL, Better Understanding for a Better Liberia. So it was an inspiration from Better Understanding for a Better World conference, and I took that to Liberia. Next slide, please. So BUBL, we started our first work since 2016 when I got back home to Liberia. And we've been doing a lot of projects since then. And one of our main projects is called BUBL National Youth Summit. So during the National Youth Summit, we invite youth leaders from across Liberia, every part of Liberia, and they all come and we engage them with topics and discussions at national level so that we can all come up with solutions to things that are going on in the country in terms of development and peace building and how we can maintain the peace in Liberia. So during the 3-4 year process of doing that, I've received some grant from the YES program to implement this project. And as Alan was saying, monitoring and evaluation is a main part of that process. You always have to be able to give report back. So the reason why for most of us that are doing project, especially alumni, that M&E is very important is that even before you start doing your project, you need to be able to collect some data so that you know your target audience, you know how, which community is, good to actually host the event and all of these things that are very important in the project outcome and also will be very important in the evaluation process. So one example, I'm going to give this little case study from a few of my projects that I've done. So I've been able to implement 3 of these BUBL Summit and other projects in Liberia from YES grants. So I'm quite familiar with the grant process and all the reporting and everything. So last year when we were doing our BUBL National Youth Summit, there were so many challenges, as everyone knows that because of the COVID and everything. And one of our project payload was to visit historical sites in Liberia, like museums and national properties and all of these things. So, and we needed to transport our participants from the venue site to these historical sites across Monrovia. So that's one of these places where M&E is very important, especially the monitoring aspect, because in advance we had to do some monitoring and talk to these bus companies that were providing tours, and then you have to compare the prices, and then you have to also see okay, what are the available data for these companies in terms of getting into accidents or getting into these kind of things that might be detrimental to your project, because you don't want people getting hurt on your project and all of these things. So it's very important to collect some of these data because they are very important in making sure your project is successful. And these are little things sometimes you might forget about, but they are very important in doing so. And also, Alan was talking about focus group. So doing most of my project, I always do surveys. That's one of the method I use to do my data collection. And so the surveys could be online survey, but mostly we do in-person survey as well while the project is going on. So we sometimes do focus group of 5, depending on how many participants we have. And then we give them questions. And so some of these questions were before the project, because once we recruit these participants, we already know who's coming. So we give them this question ahead of time. And then when the project is ongoing, we also give them the same question. And then after, we also see how their perspective and opinion is changing over the project period, from before it even started to when it was going on to after the project. So one of these projects that we did was, how can we achieve peace in Liberia beyond tribal and religious line? And so 100% of those surveys agree that peace and development can only be achieved if we work together beyond tribal line. That question, when we asked it before, it had only 54% agreement. So you can see how people opinion changes and because of how they interact with each other and how they talk about things and also how they listen to speakers that are coming to the project. And also, 98% of our participants did agree that open and willing engagement in peaceful and intertribal dialogue is the way forward. And before, when we asked that question, we didn't even get more response because people didn't really know what that was. So sometimes the question you are asking, people don't even know how to answer it. But after the project, you can see that their answer is going to improve because of the information or the knowledge they learn through the process of the project. So also, like, you need to also monitor your social media site and your website and how many interaction is coming there, like comments and views and reactions and all of that. So these are all things that you can use as a evaluation tool for how successful your project was and what you can improve on, because we got a lot of supportive comment and we also got some comment about how we can improve some aspect of our project from people that actually attended the project, the participants, and also from our guest speakers, like what we can improve on. So we keep these things and then we can use that for the next project. So next slide. So, every time you do something, you always learn along the way. Sometimes, like I've done like 3, YES project, and I've done more other project that was no YES project, but I've done a lot of projects. And every single project comes with different learning opportunity. You always learn something on the process. Like Alan was saying, is information and knowledge sharing. So you always learn something. So one of the things that I always learn, especially for this project that we did this year with all the COVID thing going on, keep track of changes in materials, because like Alan was saying, financial information is one of the most important part of your project. It makes sure that everything click. So if you don't have good financial information, then it's going to affect your reporting process, because most of the reporting is based off of how much you spend on what and what part of the project. So keep track of changes in prices of materials, and also do a lot of monitoring before the project even start, so that you can know to anticipate in price changes, and you can collect some data and know that, okay, at this time of the year in this country, this is what happened with prices of this material that you need to use, so that you can anticipate that and include it and be ready to make that adjustment. And also collect data at every stage. Like Alan was saying, collecting data is always important, and without that, you can do your reporting. So always collect data at any stage of the project, because it's going to be helpful to you. Next slide, please. Okay, so my presentation was very short because I'm one of the panelist speakers, and I was just going to use my project and my organization as a case study for what I do with monitoring and evaluation. And Alan already gave you all the information you need to do better, good monitoring and evaluation. And I'm just providing you like a case study for what I did for my project. And I've given you some information of, what I did and the results. So, you can visit, BUBL has a website you can visit. It's at bubl.org, and then Facebook and Instagram. You can find more information there if you want more references, and also things that, you can learn from projects that I've done in the past. They are all on the website. Next slide. So thank you for the time, and it was a pleasure to share my experience with you. So if you have any questions, feel free. When you go on the website, there's a link there. You can just email me and I will respond to you.
Thank you so much, Musa. That was a really interesting case study, and I'm sure that all our attendees appreciated it. Again, to our attendees, you can ask questions in the Q&A box that we can then ask to the speakers, and there will be time for you to ask following this last presentation, which we have from Ishaku, also known as Shak. Shak is a YES alumnus from Nigeria. He is currently pursuing his postgraduate studies in developmental education from Gombe State University. He was hosted in Iowa from 2009 to 2010 in the YES program. He served as the national president of the KL YES alumni in Nigeria from 2017 to 2019. And he led a team of volunteers in 2018 and 2020 during the Football for Peace project to counter violent extremist narratives in Gombe State. And Shak is the current project officer for the US government-sponsored Exchange Alumni Association Gombe State Chapter. Shak, why don't you take it away?
All right. Thank you, Alexander. Yeah, my presentation is going to be short, like Musa's. I'm just going to talk about the Football for Peace project, that particular project, what has worked and what hasn't for that particular one. So yes, my presentation is counting numbers, M&E in small projects. I gave this to my friend and he said, why am I talking about numbers so much? Maybe it's because I studied mathematics and I actually do like what you can do with numbers. So yes, Football for Peace was a project to counter violent extremism narrative in Gombe State. If you think about the Boko Haram thing going on in Nigeria, but that was just for communal crisis for the project in 2018. 2020 was for to fight religious differences in Gombe State. Next slide, please. So yes, M&E for me is just a game of storytelling, but with numbers. So yes, what we actually do for the M&E for Football for Peace was we found numbers and we told stories about them. That is according to the numbers. So what we found, yes, go on, the next one, please. So what we found out was we could actually tell stories before and we can tell stories after and during the project. So what worked for us actually was we counted our eggs before it hatched per se. So we knew that before we were writing our project, we knew that we had 16 teams that were coming in 2020. We had to go to 11 local governments. We had to go to 11 communities. We have to see the community leaders. We have to see the football teams and all of that. So yes, we counted our eggs before they hatched. That was before the money came in, or before the grants came in, the YES project grants came in. We counted that. The next thing we did was we made a projection for an expectation for the project. The project was written in 2019 and submitted in early 2020. So that was before the COVID pandemic. So what we noticed during that time was we were trying to keep up with the numbers before the Corona time. So what we noticed after that was the monitoring and evaluation changed. We actually expected to do it to get about 45,000 people for the project, but we ended up getting 15,000. But yes, those are some of the things that it doesn't work. So your numbers are not actually going to reflect what you want it for before. So I told you that we counted our eggs before they hatched, but when they hatched, we only had that number. But that was a very good number because with the restrictions and everything, we were able to keep up with getting people to actually show up, getting people to participate in the project. So what the project does was it brings teams, football teams from two communities and take them to the next. So that is community A, community B plays football in community C. So what that does was most of the teams that we selected, the players haven't been in those communities. So we noticed that there was a divide, there was a gap there. So what we did was we tried to bring the people there, and how we counted that number was see how many people showed up to the games, see how many people showed up and listened to us speak about peace, see how many people talked about it on social media. Another thing was during the project was we did 32 games. So those are the numbers we told stories about around for monitoring and evaluation. So yes, after that, we use our numbers to report. We learned lessons, the failures that we had. Before the matches, we had 15,000. After we had 40. Before the matches, we said 45,000, and after we had only 15,000. So what that actually meant was that we felt below par, but we realized that it was because of the COVID reason that we weren't able to reach that goal. So yes, some of your projects, if you aim high, some of them you're not going to reach there, but that doesn't mean you should stoop so low to not reach your numbers or to get those numbers. Next slide, please. Yes. So for this particular one, for this particular presentation, I just want us to think about if you're doing a project, just write your story well. Write it before you report it. I'm not saying you should lie about it or something, but yes, but think about what you want to write. Think about what your project story is supposed to say. Like I said, the good story has a great leading sentence, better body, and a great ending. So yes, do your monitoring and evaluation before the project, during the project, and after the project when you're reporting. Also think about what you want the donors to think about. Think of a story before you tell it, and how the numbers are going to tell the story for you. There is a simple poll. Can we have that on, please?
Yeah, I'll add your question to the chat box, right?
Okay, that's fine. So yes, it's just a simple question to just get a feel of how you think about the monitoring and evaluation after Alan and Musa have talked about it. What is it that you do before the project? What is it that you do? What do you use monitoring and evaluation for? How do you use it? And for how long is that monitoring and evaluation going to be? So I think one of the things that you need to think about is for different projects, monitoring and evaluation is very different for each of them. For the Football for Peace, we try to count the number of people our message got across. We try to go to community leaders and see what they're doing in their community and how we can actually help. So for other projects like the ones we're doing, the Skill Up project is still a YES funded project. We try to do an online survey. There are free tools online that you can actually use for that too. You can actually use the questionnaire. If you can print them out, yes, you can actually use them too. So yes, thank you for listening. And my name is Ishaku Abner. If you have any questions, please ask. I'll still be here to answer. Thank you, Alexander.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Chuck, for that. Another really interesting case study. You can see some answers coming in the chat, and maybe you can share what you think the response is with our attendees. But we are now ready to enter the Q&A session of the webinar. So please feel free to write any questions that you have in the Q&A box or simply directly in the chat box. And why don't we quit the slideshow so we can see all of our panelists. So maybe all of our panelists can turn on their cameras again. So I'd like to ask a question first that maybe all of you can answer. And that is, why is M&E important for your stakeholders? What is the reason that you might have to implement monitoring and evaluation in order to be accountable to any stakeholders in your project? Alan, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the quote I shared. Intentions versus results. So when our stakeholders trust us with either funds or whatever resources they've entrusted us with, it's important for us to be able to go back to them with the actual results of what has happened. Otherwise, even for me, was being a part of several programs, you'll see that the trust keeps reducing if you do not have good results, or if you do not have evidence that what you're implementing is working or is not working.
Great, thank you. Musa, do you have any thoughts?
Of course, you want to be able to be accountable to whoever is sponsoring you. Not only that, you also have to be able to be accountable to the community or the place you are doing your project. And the only way you can do that in the best way is to be able to have these data collected and also be able to evaluate those data so that you can give the feedback to them. And those feedbacks will make them understand, or they will also be able to evaluate and understand what worked and what didn't work. And also, because it's also important for your community, because now that data that you collected and you evaluated is going to be available on your website or on your Facebook social media place. Somebody else can reference that data so that they don't have to go through the entire process and use it for something else on their project. So it's always important to be able to do monitoring evaluation for your project.
Shaq, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think mostly what I learned about monitoring and evaluation, especially to the funders, is without it, you don't get a clear picture of what has actually happened. So if you're going to just tell a story without numbers, it means that there is an ingredient missing in that project that you did. So peradventure, if your projects, let's say some of the funders don't give you the complete funding, and that's 20% or 15% that you get after the projects to cover for the project cost. If you don't do that, if you don't do monitoring evaluation, that doesn't come back to you. So it doesn't tell a good story about you, and your future projects aren't going to be funded because of that mistake that you made before.
Great, thank you all for sharing those answers. We have a question for Musa specifically. So this person asks, Musa, thank you for sharing that great project. Can you share further, what was your consideration to choose certain methods of data collection?
Yes, so that was a very good question, because you have to know for that particular question, you have, before you can decide what question you're going to ask or what survey method you're going to use, you have to know the population, the age group, you have to know the community, you have to go in there and do some site visit. You have to know exactly what you are dealing with so that you can draft the proper question for these people. Then once you have those information available, then you will be able to actually draft the proper evaluation method or proper monitoring method, which might be survey. You might decide, okay, this group, they need survey, and then this group, they just need like question interviews. So by doing site visit and doing community engagement with stakeholders or community leaders, then you will decide from that which collection method is better for you to use.
Great, thank you. And kind of a question that's related to that, this one's really interesting. So this person asks, with respect to evaluation, I feel that acquiring honest and credible feedback may pose a problem because target communities would not want to sound ungrateful to project implementers. Apart from surveys and interviews, what other ways can one obtain an honest feedback to evaluate a project's impact? Alan, yeah.
Yes. So even before we leave surveys and interviews, it depends on how you do them. Like I shared, working with external people who are not attached to the program is one of the ways, and then those are the people who are implementing the surveys. So one of the reasons people get independent evaluators is to deal with this specific problem where you're going to have social desirability bias. So that's one of the ways. But then there are also methodologies that you can use to collect feedback. For example, there is what in the business world, they commonly use mystery shoppers or mystery, sometimes we call them mystery clients or mystery, what do you call them? Mystery, okay, they're commonly called mystery shoppers. That's what I can remember. But then you send in people who go and observe and get you honest feedback, and then they come back and give it to you. So those are the two ways I can think of it, how you can deal with that problem of that bias.
Shaka or Musa, any thoughts or next question?
Yeah, I think one of the other ways you can do that is giving incognito surveys. So usually This actually works for surveys if you're doing a survey online, let's say for Google Forms. You don't know who's filling the form, you don't know who is giving what detail. So if you can actually do that, I think people will feel most free to actually tell you what's on their mind and how you can improve your projects on that.
Yeah, I'm good. I think they cover both of what I was going to say as well.
Okay, well, we have lots of more questions coming in. Someone asks, what are some useful software for quantitative and qualitative data analysis for educational evaluation? Is anyone aware of anything?
So Excel, if you have access to Excel, Excel has a lot of functionality that is very helpful. Though it's not free, I think the one that's free is R. It's called R. So you can use that for data analysis as well. But Excel or Google Sheets, I think Google Sheets are free. So you can use those. You may need to know the different formulas. Actually, for all software, if you're going to do analysis, you need to put in a bit of time to learn the formulas that are going to help you analyze and get what you need.
Great, thank you. So another question is, if you carry a project based on donations, where your funds come from donations, what type of monitoring can you use? And can monitoring be applied to all projects, even if they're donation-based?
Can I take that one?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, the simple answer is yes. And I'll give one case study as well. My first project I did in Liberia was done through fundraiser. So people donated from my community, my host community here in Apina, and I got this money and I did the project. But because it was donation, it didn't mean that I didn't have to do monitoring and evaluation. One thing we have to remember about monitoring and evaluation is that monitoring and evaluation data is not only important for the donors and the funding agencies or partners. It's also important for the community, because the project you are doing in that community, you need to give them feedback of how improve or what changes happen during your project. So don't only think about it because somebody gave you money or somebody didn't give you money. Think about it that you owe it to the community to be able to give them that information to improve the community that you live in.
Would Shaka or Alan want to add anything, or? Okay, I can go on to the next question. So I'll ask two questions that are kind of connected. I'll start with this one though. So someone asks, how can you decide the effectiveness of your project or program if survey responses are quite different? For instance, if you have some people saying it was unhelpful, but others saying like, oh, this was really useful, how can you effectively evaluate whether your project was successful?
That's an interesting one. I think that's again helpful feedback. Then the results are 50-50. And again, hopefully you're not doing this at the end of the program, but you're able to use this feedback to, so anyway, sometimes if it's 50-50, you need to gather qualitative information. So you need to engage them further to understand, why are these ones saying it's not effective? Why are these ones saying it is effective? And then if you've done this, let's say in between the program, then you start working on that feedback to improve the project and get it to the high level of effectiveness. You address the people's needs within the program. But at the end of the day, all of it is feedback for you as the program. So again, you're not going to be able to judge if your beneficiaries have told you 50% effective and 50% ineffective. That's the status quo. That is what is happening within the program. You can't, unless you improve it further, you're not going to change those results.
I think one of the other ways to actually look at that that effectiveness is, think of it as how many people are actually saying that it's not effective, and how many are saying it's effective? If a lot of the people are saying it is effective, then that means that your project is geared towards those audience. And if you actually want to, yes, edit what you're doing per se to actually fit to the need of the ones you're leaving behind. It's actually very good to carry everybody along, but I've realized that most projects you can't take everybody along. But as long as you have a larger majority actually following your project, it means that there's an impact. There's an impact that your project is having on those ones. So yes, you can. You should be able to do it during the project so that you can change, you can find ways to change and help those that are not getting the impact of the project. But yes, you don't always need to be discouraged because some people don't get the impact of your project.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those answers. So a kind of similar question is, how can we reduce subjectivity in evaluation, if that is even possible? What do you all think?
Can I go for it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Musa, go ahead.
Yeah, so subjectivity, depends from, which angle you are speaking from. So it's kind of difficult to reduce subjectivity in, evaluation. However, these, evaluation, when we do them, sometimes we even let, outside, like external people do some evaluation with us with this data that we have. And also you do some comparison and contrast so that you can see whether what you are reporting or your evaluation result is corresponding with the trend in that particular area that you are doing your evaluation in. So I think that's one of the ways to reduce subjectivity in it, but it also depends, like I said, who is saying whether it's subjective or not, because someone like Ishaku was saying, you can carry everyone along. So you might be as very objective as you can, but someone else is still going to think that you are subjective. So it could be, it's difficult to do that.
Yeah, but also sometimes we think, so anyway, depending on the rigor you apply to the, okay, so first of all, it depends on the type of data you're collecting. And we need to look at data in two different formats. So a lot of the data, for example, if it's around facts, it's going to be very easy to establish or to get objective data. But if it's data on opinions and emotions, that is highly subjective data. Or things like hope, self-esteem, and things around that. Or even, for example, if you're dealing with satisfaction, again, you need to, and I think for me, part of it is also understanding what is the type of the data that you're interested in and you want to collect. For satisfaction, opinions, and emotions is going to be very objective. And so as you go into the evaluation, you need to know that. But at the end of the day, if that's the data you're interested in, again, you use it as subjective data because at the end of the day, it's helping you know how people are feeling, it's helping you know people's opinions. And if you want to change behavior, if you want to do behavior change, that is going to be very useful information for you as the person who is undertaking the program or project. And again, same thing with satisfaction. And like Shaq said, not everyone is going to be very satisfied, but again, you want to reach as much satisfaction as possible. You want people to be satisfied with the program. Again, when the data is showing you that those levels are low, you need to do something because there's a reason why that data is low. But if it's things around facts, you need to ensure that you're using validated tools, and there are lots of tools and resources like Shaq was sharing for some of the things you're actually collecting on. The toolkit I shared with you has some tools on some of the things that you're measuring, but also several organizations, you're not the first person collecting information on some of these things. WASH, UNICEF does a lot of work around that. Poverty, innovation for poverty action. There are several organizations that are already doing work and have created validated tools for some of these things that are going to get you very objective information. And so you can take advantage of that and collect well-validated information.
Great, thank you. So we have a question that I will direct towards Alan. I know you just spoke, but this person asked, does formative or baseline evaluation serve the same purpose as need assessment in project designing?
Okay. Yeah, I saw that question. I almost typed, but I said it's better for me to explain it. Yeah. So formative evaluations can act as needs assessment. They can help you collect information on the needs of the community. But a needs assessment cannot act as a formative assessment or a baseline evaluation. So why do I say that? Because at the point of at the point at which you're conducting formative or baseline evaluations, you're understanding the community, but the additional layer baseline information tells you is also giving you a benchmark or giving you a general understanding or the general picture of what the community is looking like at the beginning of the program. And then you can use that information to design the program that you need to design. However, needs assessment in the typical sense, people commonly do them to at the very beginning, even like when I talked about literature review, to understand what are the needs in this community, what is causing the situation that I'm currently seeing, what is causing the chaos, the wars in Musa's example. So, and then you understand, once you understand those causes, those are the needs. So formative assessments can act as a needs assessment, but the reverse can't happen.
Thank you. I'm going to address the next questions to our YES alumni. And I'll ask kind of a two-part question. What was the biggest challenge you face when implementing M&E tools in your projects? And what advice might you have for someone who has never used such tools in their community projects before? Ishaku, why don't you start?
Okay, my advice is, like I said during my presentation, think of what you want numbers to tell. Think about your reporting, think about telling somebody about your project, but with numbers. What do you want them to know about? If let's say you're doing a project about giving skills, what do you want people to understand? Do you want them to see how many people have been towards the project, have been participants in your project, or do you want them to talk about what they are doing with their skills? So you think about those parts. And one of the things that I realized during doing M&E in project is that Google is your very good friend. Like, it should be your best friend. One of the things that you can do is just a simple Google search. There's a project we did earlier this year for people with disabilities. And one of the things that actually helped was going online and finding, like Alan said, finding questions or finding surveys that have been tentative, that have been used by others. So that is one of the things that we actually employed and did. And so, yes, think about doing those things, using Google to find all those tools. They're free, they're there, and they are very free to use. So most of them don't tell you to pay for it. They just tell you for possibly an acknowledgement on the tools that you have used. So, yes.
Thank you. And how about you, Musa?
Yeah, just to add up to what Ishaku was just saying, you just have to remember that these things, sometimes there will be some challenges. There's nothing that comes without some challenge, but Google is a very good friend. Go to Google, and also remember that there are so many resources available to you in your community, like where you are doing your project. So don't forget about those resources. Don't always think that, oh, okay, I'm going to get everything from Google. Yeah, Google is good for a lot of things, but also make sure you use your community, because sometimes people forget about that, and that can be very challenging because there are some data you will not find about a certain community because that data is not available yet. So you might be the first person that is going to get that data. So make sure you use that community resource as well.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to ask one final question before we move into the conclusion of today's session. And I know monitoring and evaluation is a vast subject, and we talked about a lot here today. But if there's one thing that you wanted attendees to remember from today's session, or to remember about M&E, what is one thing that you can say that you hope that they remember following this session? And maybe each of you can answer that one.
Okay, I can go first. M&E should be your friend, and use it for your learning. Start as early as possible, and ensure that you're continuously improving. You don't want to get to the end of it all when your project hasn't worked out, and that's when you're finding out.
Great, thank you. Musa, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, so if you want to, if one thing I hope that you learned today is that, like Alan said, M&E is your friend, and not just don't think about what you're going to give to the donors or, the funders. Think about what you're going to give back to your community, because at the end of the day, that's what you are doing the project for, and that's why you are doing this initiative for. So think about that and make sure that you know that that's very important as well for you.
Yeah, I think mostly for me, it's think about those people coming after you. Think about those things that they need. So most of these things that I do, I try to make sure as possible, as much as possible, if an alumni needs something like that in the future that they do. So if I want you to remember anything from this, is think about M&E as a history of what you have done, and culminating to what other people will actually do after your project. So.
Thank you so much to all three of you for sharing that advice at the end and for answering all our questions. And thank you to our attendees for asking such interesting and insightful questions. Before we do finish here today, we do want to ask all attendees to complete a brief exit ticket, which we will share in the chat. So please fill out this survey because, to monitor and evaluate our use of this of virtual events, and to make sure that we can have your feedback and continue to provide quality virtual events in the future. So I just put the link in the chat. It should only take a minute to complete, so please do so. Please also remember that we will add this webinar with subtitles to the YES YouTube page in the coming days. I do want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I do want to give a special thanks to our three amazing guest speakers, Alan, Musa, and Ishaku. Thank you so much for sharing with us your experience and expertise. We really appreciate it, and I know that our attendees did as well. So I will just repeat again to please fill out this exit survey, because it will really help us produce quality virtual events. And again, sharing my appreciation for our guest speakers and all of you for joining us today at this virtual event. Thank you so much.